Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Evelyn of Pink Sheep Design, and today I am bringing you a tutorial for the Ozark Hooded Cowl. The way this cowl works is you fold the bottom portion into the hood and then put it on like this. So this way you have your hood with your built-in cowl, great for blocking wind chill here. See that? This was my very first one that I made, so it's kind of a practice test. So I did update it a little bit before I wrote the pattern. Now you can find the ad-free PDF version of this pattern if you prefer to follow a pattern down below in the details. I have a link to my Etsy shop where you can actually purchase the pattern for this. I used this Chanel chunky yarn from Mainstays. This is a Walmart brand. Now you can see on the back that it recommends a 25mm hook. Now this says it's super bulky, but it's a jumbo. It's a 7 weight. There's not a single super bulky out there that recommends a 25mm, so I'm not really sure what they were thinking when they put this on there. But this is what I used for this one. Now this is going to create a stiffer cowl, so if you want it to be a little bit more movable, a lot of people that tested for me used burlap blanket yarn. So this is just a 6 weight yarn, so super bulky 6 weight yarn. They held 2 to 3 strands together, so it's up to you how stiff you want the cowl to be. For this particular tutorial, I am going to be using burlap blanket extra. It's just in between these two, so it's not as small as the regular burlap blanket, but it is not as chunky as the jumbo Chanel yarn. The recommended hook size for this particular yarn is a 15mm, so it's going to have a little bit more give to the fabric created when you make the cowl. So what you're going to need for this is either, you're going to need 150 yards of yarn if you use a jumbo yarn. So if you use something like this or something like this, you'll need at least 150 yards, give or take. Now, you're going to want to double or triple it if you're using smaller yarn. So if you decide to hold 2 strands of a yarn like this together, then you'll double it. You'll need 300 yards. The only other thing you're going to need for this is a crochet hook. So you're going to need a 25mm hook for this project. So we're going to turn the camera around and get started. We are going to start out this pattern by creating our slip knot. And then we are going to chain 20. Now make sure that you don't make your chain too tight. It's easy to make the chain stitches tighter than your normal gauge. So if you need to kind of just loosen your grip on your hook up a little bit, just to be sure that your chain isn't super tight when you create it. Once you have your chain, you're going to make sure that it's laying flat. It's a little bit harder to tell with this Chanel style yarn, but there we go. So everything's facing the same way. You want to make sure that your chain isn't twisted. So you can see how this looks different from this. You can see the V's here. Here you can see these back bumps. You want to make sure that your chain is not twisted. All right, so my chain is straight across. I'm going to take my hook with the final chain still on it, and I'm going to fold my chain over, and I'm going to insert my hook into the first stitch from the chain, yarn over, and create a slip stitch. So I'm pulling that yarn through both of the loops on my hook. All right, so I have now created a circle. So from here, we're going to start the cowl portion of the hooded cowl. All right, so this is the part that's going to go over your head to cover your face. So we are going to chain 1, and we're going to work half double crochet stitches into each of the chain spaces around. So you'll have 20 half double crochet stitches because you had 20 chain spaces. Now, if you need help with the basics, if you are extremely new to crocheting and maybe you haven't used half double crochet before, you can check out my Learn to Crochet series here on my YouTube channel. I can put that link in the description for you. There's a playlist that goes through all of the basics, starting with the chain and the slip knot and single, half double, double crochet. So if you're just learning and you're new, that's a great place to start. And once you master those basics, you can come back and follow some of the more specific tutorials like these. So I'm going to continue working these half double crochet stitches all the way around. All right, so I like to double count my stitches before I move on to the next row. So I'm going to start here with the first one. I'm just going to count around. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19. So I need to place one more single or half double crochet stitch here, and that can be difficult sometimes to tell where the chain ends. So I always say to double check your count before you join for each row. So now I have 20 stitches. I'm going to join into this very first half double crochet with a slip stitch. So again, for slip stitch, I'm just going to put my hook into that first stitch, yarn over, and pull through both of the loops on my hook. From here, I'm going to chain one. I'm going to turn my work. So instead of continuing around this way, I'm going to turn my work over. And usually that means I flip my work inside out. So if I had continued going around this direction, and instead I'm going to turn and work into the inside of these stitch spaces, so you can flip your work too. So that way it just makes it a little easier. So same thing here. I'm going to place 20 half double crochet stitches all the way around, and we're actually going to repeat this for a total of 5 rows. So we completed the first row, working on the second row, and I will meet you guys back here. You're going to do this for 5 rows, no increases or decreases, just all the way around. Join with a slip stitch, chain one, turn your work, and work again for a total of 5 rows. I finished my 5th row, and at this point you want your cowl section to be at least 8 to 9 inches tall. So I measured, mine looked a little short, and I've not used this yarn for this pattern before, and I'm going to need at least one more row to get it to 8. So I'm going to do probably 2 more rows just to make sure that I have enough coziness with my cowl section. I decided to do 2 more rows, so I have a total of 7 rows. And I am at just over 9 inches. That's a little bit taller than the pattern calls for, and you can kind of play around with it. It just depends on how much of this that you want covering your face. You can try it on if you're not sure. So keep in mind that you're going to have a little of this that will kind of flip up a little bit, but I really like for it to cover my nose. So this seems like a good one. And some fabric, again, this is not going to be as stiff as the 25mm jumbo yarn that I used for the other one. This is a stiffer yarn. So this has a little bit more give. So it's easier to add a couple of more rows so that it's got a little more height here at the cowl portion. Now that we have the cowl section completed, we're moving on to the hood. So you can see I did my slip stitch to join here on this row. So I'm going to chain one, I'm going to turn my work. So I'm going to be working onto the inside of these stitches. And I'm going to half double crochet 18 stitches around. All right. By working 18 stitches around, I left 2 of our 20 total stitches around the cowl unworked. So these 2 are going to remain open. We're going to chain one, turn our work, and repeat the same thing back across. So instead of doing rounds, we are now working in rows because we're not going to be joining with a slip stitch. We're just going to be turning our work and continuing to work rows until the hood is as tall as we want it to be. So in the pattern, it calls for your final piece, so cowl and hood together, to be anywhere from 21 to 22 inches long. Now, because my cowl, I added an inch, so my cowl is about 9 inches tall, then my total piece will probably end up needing to be about 23 inches tall. So you'll just want to keep an eye on that as you go. The pattern calls for 12 additional rows for the hood once you're finished with the cowl. So right now I'm working on row 2. And I'll get that one finished so you guys can see what that's starting to look like. Okay. So from here, you can start to see this opening that we're creating. So this is going to stay open the whole way up to create the hood opening. So I'm going to start out by doing another, I've done 2 rows. I'm going to do another 10 rows, and then we're going to measure and see where we're at. All right, I finished my 12th row. I'm going to give this a measure so we can see where we're at. So I said before I wanted it to be at least 23 inches. And it looks like I am right on the money at 23 inches. So what I recommend doing next, instead of immediately seaming up your hood, and you see what I did there. So here's the opening right down the center. I'm going to take the ends together and pull down. And that creates the seam. This is where you're going to seam up to create your hood. But before you do that, I recommend using stitch markers and closing up the hood and then trying it on. Make sure you like the fit. Make sure you don't want to remove or add any rows to your hood. If you don't have stitch markers that work well with jumbo yarn, you can use contrasting colored yarn. Or we do sell these in our Etsy shop. These are 3D printed stitch markers that are meant to be used with jumbo yarn. I love jumbo yarn so much that our Etsy shop kind of revolves around things that work very well with that style of yarn. So I'm going to place a couple of stitch markers along this seam, and then we're going to try it on together. Here we are, got our little faux seam up the top. I'm going to flip the cowl into the hood. You can see how I flipped that up inside, and we're going to try her on. Oop. Trying to be gentle so I don't pop the stitch markers. Oh yeah. Okay, so I can get all these scraps out of the way. I think that's a great size for the hood. I don't think I need to go up or down. I think that's going to lay really nice here. And then I can flip this down. So yeah, I think I'm good to go ahead and seam the hood up, but I wanted to make sure I liked the fit before I did so. I would definitely recommend doing that. Make sure you like it. I could potentially maybe take one row out if I wanted to, if I don't want the hood to be so slouchy. See, I've got some slouch down here, but if you like that, then you can leave it as it is. All right, I have removed my stitch markers, and I'm going to flip my cowl inside my hood just to make it easier for you guys to see what's happening, so it's a little bit shorter. All right, so you guys saw what I did before, where I pulled the 2 ends together and pulled it down, and that's going to create the seam line for me to sew up the top of the hood. Now I have not tied off yet, and the reason is because I want to leave a tail long enough to seam up my hood, so that way I don't have to use a whole separate piece of yarn to do that. So what I do to measure how much I'm going to need is I take my tail and I make it double the length that I'm going to need to seam up the top. I'm going to use one of my jumbo needles. Well, I guess I need to pull this through first. Here we go. Pull that through. And I'm going to flip this around just because I'm starting this way, so working down is going to be easier for me. So this is where I tied off. I'm going to start on the other side and go underneath the first stitch and pull up. Now keep in mind, you don't want to pull the chenille yarn too tightly. It's more likely to snap than other types of yarn. So you want to be gentle. Pull it tight, but don't pull it too tight because you don't want your yarn to snap. So other side into the underneath of that yarn. I always try to get underneath at least 2 strands of yarn. So if you're looking at the top, you've got your V stitches. I try to get underneath both of those strands of yarn. So you can see 2 strands of yarn on my needle. And pull that through, and then I hold the end where I started to pull that stitch tight. Go underneath the stitch, back through, hold the edge, pull that tight. And I just repeat this all the way down the hood. Once I'm done, I will flip my hood up, and I usually tuck my yarn into the inside of the hood, and then I can weave it in down the back. I have had people who like their hoods to not have as pointy of a tip. If you weave your yarn down the back and cinch it, you can tighten this up a little bit, and it keeps the hood from being as pointy. So it actually rounds it out a little bit and cinches up the back a little bit as well. And that also keeps your hood from overhanging over your forehead if you don't want it to be quite as big. So that's always an option. You can cinch that up, notch your yarn, and weave the ends in. Now that we are done with the hood portion, the only thing that we have left is to create a border, a single crochet border all the way around. Now you don't have to do this step. I prefer it. I think it gives a little more structure to the hood. I really like the way that the added border looks. So I'm going to add one for this one. You're going to continue to use your 25mm hook. You're going to start with a slip knot like you did before when we started this whole thing. I'm going to join in a bottom corner of this hood opening. So I'm going to join right down here. And I'm going to join with a single crochet. So to join with a single crochet, you've got your slip knot around your hook, you insert your hook, you yarn over, you pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through. That creates a single crochet to start. So you're not having to do a slip, stitch, chain one, single crochet into the same spot. You just start with a single crochet. Now we're going to work single crochet stitches all the way around the hood opening. Once I get all the way around with my border, I'm going to join with a slip stitch into this first single crochet stitch, excuse me. Pull that slip stitch tight, leave a nice tail so that you can weave that in. Tie off. And you are finished. All you have to do now is weave in your ends. So for now, I'm just going to tuck my ends in. And I can always run these down just a little bit so that you can't see them when I try it on. And that's usually what I do, especially on this one. You have 2 strands of yarn since you started and ended in the same place. So I like to take both ends, weave them down away from the top, And then what I will do is I will tuck one underneath a couple of strands of yarn so they're separated, and then I'll actually tie a knot here. Just like so. And then you can trim your ends. So let's try it on. Alrighty, you ready? Oh, I love it so much. There you go, you can see. So you can, again, flip this down if you don't want it all the way up over your neck. You can drop the hood back. So if you've got a jacket on, you can wear this underneath. You got your built-in hood. Fabulous. I hope you guys enjoyed this project as much as I enjoyed making the tutorial for you. Again, you can purchase the PDF pattern for this if you would like. All of your support is welcome. I have tons of beginner-friendly patterns and tutorials. Patterns in my Etsy shop if you want to check out some new patterns, but I also have some great free tutorials here on the YouTube channel. Please be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more. Let me know in the comments what else you'd like to see if you enjoyed this video. And thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great day. Happy hooking!